And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Mshiri Nyaga in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm with the Local Development Research Institute. We're going to have a really interesting hour going into this. Hello, everyone. Welcome. There you go. Apologies about that. So we are live on YouTube, and of course the recording of this will be available on our YouTube channel. After this, so be on the lookout for that. And as you can see on our live events page, on the side you have a Slido where we put up a question every now and then. So we're going to start off with a little bit of knowing who we are, who's on the call today. So not necessarily your name, but just tell us what sector you work in. And 1 second. And yes, so you can see the poll is live. So please go ahead and let us know, which what sector you currently work in. It's health, agriculture, extractives, governance, whatever it is. Glad to see someone there who works in water. Excellent. So do go ahead and let us know a little bit about that. We are today joined by colleagues from our broader network, Silvana Fumega from ILDA. ILDA together with LDRI and others are part of the Data for Development Network. We work around as a community around supporting availability, use, and responsible use of data for development. And then increasingly also other technologies such as artificial intelligence and blockchain. So we'll be hearing from her, and I'm delighted that she'll be here. She'll be telling us a little bit about herself. And of course, my colleague, Lynette Juma, who's the program lead for the Africa Open Data Network program here at LDRI. She'll be talking a little bit about the Global Data Barometer as well, which is what Silvana will be breaking down for us. And I'd encourage you to visit the website after this and see what this project is about, the Global Data Barometer, and also see how some of these could be useful in your own context, whichever country, whichever sector you work in. So because of time, which is hardly ever on our side, I'd like to invite Silvana to tell us a little bit about ILDA and tell us about the Global Data Barometer. Silvana, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Excellent. Yeah, so Silvana, over to you. Always good to see you, by the way.
Thank you. I think we need to stop sharing this so I'm able to start. Oh, thank you so much. There, so I can share my presentation with you all. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to discuss a little bit about the Global Data Barometer and the importance for the African context. I'm really happy to be here and to provide a general overview of the project, and then we can discuss later how it's important and how to be applied to the African context. First of all, just a little bit about myself. I'm Silvana Fumega. I'm currently the director of the Global Data Barometer. And I'm also, having two hats at the moment. I'm the research and policy director of BILDA, as Mushiri mentioned. We are one of the hubs of the D4D and OD4D network. LDRI is the African one, so we are really happy to be together in this particular project. And we are currently implementing this pilot edition of the Global Data Barometer. Together for this project, we are with an amazing team of people working around the world. I know that Fiona is there in the audience. She's working with us in the comms session, and she's based in Zimbabwe, and we have other people working in the core team from Latin America and Europe as well, together with a global network of hubs that I'm going to tell you a little bit about in the next few minutes. So basically, what I wanted to start with was a general idea that why we are doing what we are doing with this new pilot edition. It's been almost a decade since the launch of the Open Data Barometer that many of you probably are familiar with, but we are doing that, because mainly, even though public data has been more accessible in the last decade, we all know that, but right now we don't know exactly how well it is deployed as a resource for tackling social changes, enabling collaboration, driving innovation, and improving accountability. Without this benchmark, we are losing track of the key data agenda-related issues that affect policymaking and innovations. Therefore, this is the base why we are now launching the Global Data Barometer that aims to better track the extent to which data is governed, shared, and used for public good. And I think this phrase is key to understand what's the idea behind it. Data for public good is the rationale behind this whole exercise. And to give you a little bit of background, nowadays we are talking about some questions or some issues in the data agenda that are, for example, privacy and care of data, protection of human rights in the development of technological interventions, also data governance structure, digital security, development of techniques and tools for machine learning. All these topics can no longer be ignored. They were not part of the initial agenda that was mostly an almost exclusive concern with the increase of accessibility of public data, but now the agenda is much more complex, so we need new measurements to understand what is the context and what is the situation that we are facing. So in this context, the GDB has been designed to respond to these issues and fill critical knowledge gaps on how data policy and practices are unfolding in different sectors, regions, and countries around the world. And I want to stress that because for us, it's really important to include as many countries and regions as possible. We have the support of IDRC, the International Development Research Center, in particular the Global Research Hub, and we have additional organizations that are providing support to the core team and the hubs, such as, for example, United Nations Population Fund, among other organizations. Sorry that I have the presentation in a different screen, so I'm moving back and forth. A little bit of history, and I'm sure you're gonna see at least one familiar face in that picture. That was back in January 2020. The project was initially designed there in a workshop in Washington, D.C. in our previous slide when we were able to travel and to see each other in person. And there we had the participation of many experts around the world, including Mushiri, here from LDRI, as you can see in the picture. This initial process was followed by the work of the great team during all 2020, even though there were many obstacles posed by the pandemic, as you might imagine. And some of the things that are important in this particular exercise. As I mentioned, I mean, the Global Data Barometer is based on the work done for many years by the Open Data Barometer. However, the changes in the data landscape ask for new exercises to understand the ecosystem. So in this case, we are looking not just to open data, we are looking at the data through semantic lenses, and that's why it's really important what Mushiri asked about you, about which sectors you are coming from. And also, I mean, one of the things, I mean, we are not just looking at the different structure in terms of the structure of the research, but also in terms of the approach. What we are doing is we are implementing a broad network of regional hubs they are covering more than 100 countries around the world. LDRI, I mean, here is one of the key players because they are one of the largest hubs in the world with around 23 countries under its coordination. So, and together with that, I mean, there are many hubs around the world looking at different regions because we think it's really important to understand not only the data that is coming, but also the context of this data coming from different countries and regions. And besides that, what we are doing is not only a large network of regional hubs, but also thematic partners. I mean, again, we are stressing the idea of looking at the data through thematic lenses. So we have some collaboration, for example, you have some names there that are Land Portal, Open Government Partnership, Transparency International, Open Contracting, Open Ownership, Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency. Those are some of the partners that are helping us not only to develop the modules, but also looking at the data from different lenses and providing their expertise on each of the particular topics that we are collecting data from. And also, I mean, some of the other important points that I want to make is that we are trying to make this exercise more inclusive, not only in terms of the topics, like, for example, thinking about marginalized populations in different contexts, but also in terms of the format. We are thinking about that we need to have at least some basic translation. For example, we are looking at the beginning, English, French, and Spanish. We think it's really important to convey and deliver the messages in different languages to different audiences. As I mentioned, we have a hub structure because it's not only important about the knowledge that they're providing, but it's also important to have ownership of the products. So that's the reason as well, apart from the knowledge itself, that we think it's really important to have this structure. And one other element that I want to highlight is that the core research team have a majority of members from the Global South. So we are really proud of the balance and the mix that we are finding in the core team, not only in the regional hubs, but also in the main core team. I mean, and from once, I mean, Global South members are majority in a global exercise. So for us, I think it's really important to stress that point. In terms of the exercise itself and the research, we are looking at the data through 4 pillars. You can see it there: governance, capability, availability, and use and impact. We have that, and we are covering that in the national context. There you can see some of the topics that we cover through primary data and secondary data in some cases. And there as well, you can see that we have sectoral practices. As I mentioned, there are some partners that are helping us in these particular topics. But in general, I mean, as an overview, we examine in this first edition money, property, and power through 5 different thematic modules. And they are political integrity, public procurement, company information, public finance, and land. And there are also 2 key topics that we think are really important in this current situation. There are climate action and health and COVID. To provide a little bit more of detail in terms of what we mean with these 4 pillars, I want to just briefly clarify. I mean, this is just the general structure. I know it looks big, and it's really big. And those of you that are completing the survey, you know that is a big survey, and we are asking many questions and many things, but there you can see a glance of what is the main structure. I mean, there, as you see, you have the core modules that are governance and capability. You have the thematic modules that the indicators are fitting one of the 4 pillars. Again, governance, capability, availability, use, and impact, and each of them have some questions about existing elements and STEM. And also, in terms of the 4 pillars that I already mentioned, I want to briefly explain what they mean. In terms of governance, what we are doing is we explore the extent to which the collection, sharing, and secure management of specific datasets are safeguarded and optimized through laws, regulations, policy, infrastructure, and guidance. I mean, these legal frameworks and policy frameworks is really important for us to understand how to make it better, because we have, in many cases, availability of data, but we need to know exactly how the governance structure is in place to make it better, and for, at the end of the day, to make it use of that data. Going together with that, I mean, we not only need a governance structure, but we know we need capabilities. So in that sense, those are issues related to access, skill, infrastructure, institutions, and intermediaries. In many cases, those are collected also with secondary data. I mean, there are primary indicators, but also we are drawing from other measurements around the world to have a better idea of the capabilities inside the public sector and also civil society to make use of the data. Availability, this is one of the usual suspects, as I said, because this was the main core pillar of the Open Data Barometer. I mean, and in here is the largest section, but it's not the only one. As I mentioned, there are key pillars that we need to know to make better use of data. In the availability section, is based the primary survey that most researchers are completing now, and it explores certain categories of data, if they are available, shared, and if they have the adequate quality to be able to be reused for public good at the end. And then we have what we think is really important, and those who works in methodology probably knows that it's really difficult to measure, is about data use and impact, is to find evidence of particular uses of data and their impact in a particular country or region. Just not to go too much, to extend too much the explanation, and then if you have particular questions, we can go into the detail later. This is a general idea of where we are now with the process. I mean, there were capacity building sessions for coordinators of the hubs and also the researchers. There was a mini test at the beginning to really assess the quality of the completion of the answers, I mean, quality and format. Now we are in the middle of the data collection. So in that sense, I mean, probably Lynette can tell you a little bit more on the stage in Africa. And once we have the expert survey completed, we are going to have the peer review process and the thematic review. I mean, the peer review process is handled within each of the hubs and the regions, and the thematic review is the knowledge that each of the thematic partners are providing in terms of the data that is collected. So at the end, we are going to have the research gathering data stage completed, and then we're going to move into the development of the final report and the tools to be able to share all the data with all of you. Also, I mean, something to stress there is that we are going to add the voices of different regional hubs and thematic partners to the final report, because we think it's really important not only to show some of the trends and the findings of the general exercise, but it's also important to provide a space for each of the regions to provide what they find in their particular context and explain a little bit better what we are looking at, and what are those things that we can find in these particular regions. As you know, just to finish, this is a pilot edition. I'm sure we're going to do many things good and many things wrong. So the idea is to learn about all the things during this year, and in next editions, try to make it better and make it bigger. We want more countries to be involved. We have all the regions, but we want more countries to be involved. We want more topics to be involved, and we want more aspects of the data to be involved in future editions. So basically, this is just a general overview. As I mentioned, I'm open to any questions and comments later once we finish with Lynette's presentation. And aside from that, as Mushiri mentioned, we invite you all to check the website, the Global Barometer website, also the Twitter account or LinkedIn account, whatever you prefer. And there you can find ways to contact us if you have any comments or concerns. So basically, thank you so much to LDRI for this invitation. And hopefully, we are going to have some productive conversation later.
Thank you, Silvana, for that excellent introduction and overview of the Global Data Barometer, or GDB as we call it. So good people, if you have any questions, please do put them on the chat, the Slido on the right side of your screen. The Q&A section there, gives you an opportunity to put in any questions that you have, and it shall be answered during the session. As Lynette prepares to come on, just want to give you an idea of how the poll went. I'm looking at some interesting numbers here. Quite a number of people working around the areas of data and research more broadly. A couple of people working in media, agriculture, data for development, poverty research, open data, water, civil society, data science training. So this is great. Some evidence production folks here in the house today, as well as those working on evidence use. So that's a good mix. And I have one more question that's come up now. Essentially just asks you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate data availability in your country based on your experience? So your experience here, of course, is about whichever sector you work in. So if your view is only seeing water or data on civil society, that's good enough. Let me know what your thoughts are. There I can see some input coming in. Quite a number scoring under 4. I see someone who's rated there as a 10. That's amazing. You could, in the Q&A, please just put in something there and tell us a little bit about your experience. Well, why is it 10? How good? What country are you from? This is amazing. And of course, I can see we have.
We want to know now.
yeah, we do, don't we? This is so it's good to see that, and we have a couple of people voting in at 8 as well, so it'd be great to hear from you on that. Yeah, so this is excellent. I'm looking out in the Q&A, for an idea of which country are you from. If you put in an 8 or a 10, let us know. And then, of course, what sector you're working in. A lot of people scoring their experience under 5, and I can see a 6 there. Majority seem to be scoring their experience at 2. So 2 stars. I'm wondering, Silvana, how would you rate your experience on data availability?
first of all, I'm wondering why. I mean, I want to know the reasons why they were saying 2 or 3. I mean, add us also 8 or 10. In general sense, I mean, and of course, as I mentioned before, I mean, each region and each country is a different context, and there are different explanations for the different situations. In general sense, I mean, looking back at the beginning of the Open Data Barometer, we are seeing more data available. That doesn't mean that it's being used or is being, how do we say, good quality, and that's what we want to know now. But in terms of availability, there's no doubt that in a general sense, and again, I'm not talking about any specific context, there's more data available. But now we need to look into what is this data mean? How is constructed? What are the infrastructures that are surrounding the availability of the data to make it useful exactly, as I mentioned before, for public good. So that's the reason we are doing that, because maybe in some cases you have like particular areas where the availability is really good, but there's no structure within the whole public sector to make use of the data in different other areas. So again, governance and capability, we think, are key topics or issues to think about, not only the availability, but the whole framework that is surrounding this availability of data. But in general sense, I mean, comparing to what we had a decade ago, I mean, we have more data. The problem is, I mean, what's the quality of that data, and what are we doing with that data if we can do something?
Yeah, and whether we feel safe doing something with it, right?
And who are, I mean, adding to that, who are we including in that data and who we are leaving behind? Because that's another topic that is really important. I mean, who are we including in the data we are producing for different topics? And that changes depending on the topic. But in many cases, we are leaving many populations behind. So we need to look at those details. I mean, now that we have the availability in many cases, not all, of course, but there where we have the availability of data, we have to look deeper to understand what we are doing with that data.
Yeah, excellent. And that's quite true. And I see a question in the Q&A, which I'll come back to, Silvana, maybe after Lynette is done. Someone asking,
Sure.
do you compare countries using qualitative information? So think about that as Lynette, does her piece, and then we'll come back to deal with the Q&A questions. So Lynette, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mushiri, and thank you so much, Silvana, for that presentation and brief background on the GDB and what we hope to do. My name is Lynette Juma. I'm Program Officer at the Local Development Research Institute, or LDRI. I'm also Program Lead for the Africa Open Data Network Program at LDRI, and I'm coordinating the Sub-Saharan Africa Regional Hub for the Global Data Barometer. We'll get into a bit more detail on that, but that's a bit about who I am. LDRI is a think tank. We're based in Nairobi, but we support programs across Sub-Saharan Africa, particularly for the Africa Open Data Network, programs touching on how to build capacity of stakeholders around, making available, using and sharing data and evidence for development. So today I'd like to share a bit more about, what exactly does the GDB mean for Sub-Saharan Africa? What does it mean for stakeholders working on data and different sectors in Sub-Saharan Africa? Sorry, just 1 second. So the way I'll go through this is I'll maybe give you a bit of background about who we are as LDRI, and then we'll get into the GDB in Sub-Saharan Africa. What does it look like? Which countries are we covering? Which ones are we not? And then we'll then finally get into, what does the GDB mean for Sub-Saharan Africa? So like I mentioned, LDRI is a think tank. We're based here in Nairobi, Kenya, but we do implement programs across Sub-Saharan Africa. Primarily, our work exists to support African countries in their efforts at taking practical evidence-informed actions to end hunger, poverty, and reduce inequality. accountability, and the way that we organize our work is in two broad areas. So one would be good governance, transparency, and accountability, and the other one would be food and nutrition security. So our work on data, building capacity on data, using data for development and evidence-informed decision making would be, nestled more under the transparency, good governance, and accountability program or practice area, and that's where the Africa Open Data Network program is nestled. The Africa Open Data Network program is a few years old now, and we do implement programs that kind of seek to either generate research or surface evidence on, what can governments but also other stakeholders do to increase their capacity on, making data available, sharing that data, using that data. We also do a bit of research around enabling data frameworks for sharing data. So we do have a draft model open data policy that we put together in 2018. We do a lot of convening of multi-stakeholder spaces, so bringing different stakeholders around a common agenda, putting together data products like data dashboards, especially for our public sector partners across Sub-Saharan Africa, and also strengthening capacity within public sector partners by seconding fellows to them through a project we call the Africa Open Data Fellowship. We're in the second phase of it. So yeah, we do quite a few things with under the Africa Open Data Network program, but research is a big component of it, and that's kind of where the Global Data Barometer fits in. So as LGRI, we are coordinating research for the Sub-Saharan Africa Hub for the Global Data Barometer across 24 countries. So I have listed them here. It's a very long list of 24 countries. 10 of them are Anglophone, 8 of them are Francophone, and 2 of them are Lusophone, Angola and Mozambique. So we will be collecting data across, or we are currently collecting data across 24 countries. Silvana has already spoken quite a bit to the pillars of the GDB, so the issue of governance, capability, availability, and use and impact, but this also just goes a bit to tell you the specific thematic areas that are covered in the GDB. So we have climate action, public finance, health and COVID, political integrity, public procurement, and company information. So these are the areas that you can anticipate that data from the Global Data Barometer is going to cover. In terms of timelines, we are in the process of collecting data across the 24 countries, and we anticipate that we should finish and get into reviewing of that data in the next week. Actually, at the end of this week, we'll be getting into reviewing of that data. So we are very much advanced in the research process, and kind of just hoping to kind of follow through the next months and get into the final drafting of the report and sharing of the data that we're getting, which is we're already seeing very interesting patterns on it. So in terms of outputs, what can stakeholders look out for? So of course there will be a flagship report. As Silvana mentioned, this is a pilot edition of the Global Data Barometer. So there will be a global report. There will be regional and sectoral analysis. So we will anticipate a report for Sub-Saharan Africa, but also sector-specific analysis. We'll also be sharing a research data, an open research ready data set that I'm sure will go to support a lot of research work across the continent, but also we'll be sharing qualitative, sorry about my speed, I'll slow down a little bit. We'll also be sharing a qualitative case study library. For me, this is one of the most interesting aspects of the Global Data Barometer. From the work that we have been doing as LGRI under the Africa Open Data Network program over the last few years, one of the things that always comes up from stakeholders is, where is a good example of where this is happening? So a lot of the initiatives have sounded really good in theory, but stakeholders kind of struggle to find use cases or examples or case studies from Sub-Saharan Africa, from contexts that are similar to theirs, where they could actually see this in action and potentially learn a few lessons from. So for me, this is a really interesting aspect of the Global Data Barometer, the fact that we will be sharing a qualitative case study library. So I want to go a bit into detail in terms of what do these outputs mean for stakeholders in Sub-Saharan Africa. So one is a global flagship report. And as Silvana mentioned, this report is going to be a critical new benchmark on country level data governance, data capability, data availability, and data use for public good. So really it's going into quite a bit of detail to tell us at the country level, what does data governance look like? What does data capability look like? What does data availability look like? And is this data being used for public good, really? So this is going to be a really important document that really sets the tone to help different stakeholders understand how these different issues, especially across the 4 pillars, are manifesting themselves across the different 24 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. And the second one, which is really important, is the issue of driving data for development through provision of evidence. So, of course, the Global Data Barometer is going to, provide quite a bit of information that is going to underpin a lot of initiatives going forward that drive data for development and socioeconomic development outcomes. So, a lot of this information is going to form the basis of what then informs a lot of interventions that are going to be taken up by institutions, individuals, organizations implementing different initiatives that kind of seek to improve development outcomes and very much targeted with the SDGs. In terms of regional and sectoral analysis, one thing that is really important or that stakeholders can really look forward to is the fact that the GDB will provide actionable insights on how data is working in specific sectors. So we'll be able to see how these different issues manifest themselves. So, for example, data governance in land versus data governance in health, data capabilities across those different sectors. How is data use manifesting itself in land? I've already started to see very interesting, patterns in terms of land governance, land data governance across Sub-Saharan Africa. So already seeing opportunities there for stakeholders to plug in and fill certain gaps that we're already seeing, even in terms of data governance and what data governance frameworks exist or do not exist. So that would be a really, really important bit that stakeholders can look forward to, very specific insights on what exactly can you do to improve or improve certain specific issues on data in specific sectors. And the other one is opportunities for cross-learning. So this again for me is a really interesting bit of the Global Data Barometer, that we're able to kind of juxtapose multiple sectors against each other and really see what could we potentially learn from one sector into the other. So again, this is something that might really provide a good basis for stakeholders to really be able to compare and see, what is happening in this sector and what can be borrowed into the other sector to support, data sharing, whether it's improving data availability or data use and stuff like that. And like I mentioned, that then provides a really good way for stakeholders to identify entry points for the initiatives going forward. So from this data, we'll be able to see where are the gaps in terms of data availability. Are we seeing a pattern of land tenure data, for example, not being available across the board? Are we seeing a gap in terms of there just isn't land data governance frameworks across the continent. And this then will provide a really good opportunity for stakeholders working in those areas, whether it's regionally or the national level, to see how they can sort of help plug in those gaps. So really good opportunity there for you to see where are the gaps in terms of data governance, data capabilities, and how can different stakeholders kind of plug into those gaps, both at the regional level and at the national level. And the other one, of course, is powering critical research. Like I mentioned, the Global Data Barometer is going to share an open research-ready data set. So, this then will provide an opportunity for anyone who wants to conduct research around data governance capabilities, use to kind of get that data and kind of, use it in terms of what they want to pursue. And potentially we are hoping that this would really support the creation of further research papers and reports, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa, to really for researchers to kind of pick this data and run with it and explore, what does this mean in their different countries, in their different contexts, and to kind of get spin-offs of it for us to further understand how these issues manifest themselves and how they relate to other adjacent issues. And then, of course, there's the issue of research methods will be shared under an open license. So, of course, there's an opportunity here for other researchers or think tanks or other institutions to be able to learn from this process. As part of our work in Sub-Saharan Africa, one of the requests we've had from our researchers is, are we able to have an open version of the survey? So really already seeing interest there regarding how these tools can be repurposed by different researchers or different institutions across Sub-Saharan Africa to support their work down the line. And then, of course, like I mentioned, the qualitative case study library, really being able to see relevant and context-specific case studies on data governance frameworks, available data sets, use cases across multiple countries and sectors. So for me, this is really important because it's one of the biggest ways of encouraging uptake of data initiatives, is people being able to see this work or not work in other places, and for them to see, this is how we can improve our initiative. This is, these are the lessons we could potentially learn from here. These are, potential best practices that we can see. And again, the Sub-Saharan African context might be really different across the board, but in some regions, some of this context can be replicated broadly, not in the specific sense, very broadly. And the fact that we can see examples from Uganda as Kenya, and we can see examples from South Africa, and we can see examples from Ghana. It's a really good opportunity for us to be able to cross-learn in Sub-Saharan Africa and just see how these issues, how use cases are there, potential best practices that we can learn and borrow from. So, I mean, broadly speaking, these are the broad areas we anticipate or look forward to engaging with stakeholders on as we go down this process and get to the end of data collection and further the publication of the report and dissemination and sharing of all the additional outputs. There is quite a lot of information that will be coming from this, but also really big opportunities for stakeholders to kind of take this data and use it either for research or to identify potential entry points to plug in with initiatives going forward and stuff like that. So, I mean, broadly speaking, the Global Data Barometer research, as much as it is a pilot edition, really provides multiple opportunities for different stakeholders, whether you're government, whether you're private sector, whether you're a CSO, whether you're just an individual citizen and you want to do your research, whether you're a university student. So there's really multiple entry points here and multiple outputs for stakeholders to engage with, but also to interrogate a lot of the issues that Silvana was talking about earlier in terms of, who are we leaving out? And I'm glad that one of the things built into the design of the GDB is the issue of, sensitivity and being aware of communities that are marginalized in countries and being able to incorporate that in the data that is being collected. So definitely multiple opportunities here to engage with different stakeholders. So I look forward to hearing from you about, what does this mean so far from the information we've shared? Are you kind of seeing any opportunities here that you can plug into with your work from the sectors that are covered by the GDB, the outputs that will be coming out, from this research from September, end of September, October going forward, but that's it from me up to this point. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you any kind of questions or comments or what you already see as potential entry points for the work that you're doing with the GDB. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette. And I think there are definitely some really interesting potential outputs from this that could be catalytic for in terms of moving forward on the measurement agenda, in terms of how do you tell how well we're doing, and how do you tell how well we're doing across the board. I think one of the things I really like about GDB is that allows us to do a sectoral deep dive, which we may not have been able to do with the Open Data Barometer, but it now allows us to, to begin moving in that direction, because the landscape, the data landscape is not homogeneous in any one country. You will find, the health sector might be doing really, really well. The transport sector might not. The agriculture sector, you have this mixed bag of progress. So I think the GDB just does provide us with this really interesting kind of uniform approach that we can apply at the sectoral level and do deep dives that help those people in those sectors really address the issues around data. We've had, like I mentioned, we had a question earlier, that I think I'd asked Silvana to think about, Lynette, if you have any thoughts around it as well, happy to hear. And it was Kosi who was asking, how do you compare countries using qualitative information? So I'm not sure if he's asking for the methodological breakdown or whether he's asking how possible is this even. So maybe a little bit the qualitative versus quantitative amounts of data that we're using, we're collecting under the GDB. Silvana, maybe you could unpack that briefly.
Yeah, first of all, before going into that, I want to stress really important things that Lynette mentioned, and we think are really important because we know that we are developing a global report and it's going to collect a lot of information, global trends, the voices of the regional hubs and so on. But I think one of the most important outputs that we are going to have are going to be the projects, the reports, the studies that other people from different regions and from different sectors are going to be doing with the data that we are collecting. We want to encourage and support these other works that are coming out of the data and information that we are providing, because I think it's really important, besides the general trends that we can provide as a global exercise, I think it's really important to make use of that data and put it into work into a particular context within a region or across regions to see what we can learn from each other to make it better. And the other thing is that to stress the actionable points, that the idea is looking at governance and availability, for example, is to look at places where governments and also civil society can improve the things that they are doing, looking at the way that they are structuring the governance framework or the capabilities that they have in different places inside a particular public sector to not only publish data, but also make use of that data themselves, or to allow other organizations and other sectors to make use of the data to improve whatever it is, if it's academic work, if it's some business work, I mean, different areas. I think those two things are really important. And I think it was a great presentation from Lynette stressing these points and encouraging everybody to make use of the data. Going back to your question, Mushiri, what we are doing is, first of all, looking at the data that is coming from each country or each region. The main idea is not to compare countries. I mean, even though we are going to be doing that at the end of the day, the idea is to understand how a country is doing and how good it could be in the future working on different topics. So that's one of the main things that I want to stress. The idea is not to rank countries and see if one is 1, the other is 2, the other is 3, or whatever it is, but looking at what is inside that data to understand better the context. In terms of the qualitative information and the quantitative data, the survey is structured to collect data in a structured way, so we can, at the end of the day, compare some points, but we are also providing like particular, let's say, boxes for researchers to explain the context, to understand what they did to get to that answer. So to know a little bit more about the context and to know a little bit about what is going on, where were the obstacles, or where were the things that they could find, and some things that we can put in the spotlight as good examples to follow. So in that sense, I mean, I don't want to put the stress in the comparison, even though we are doing that with a structured survey. So the data that is coming is a structure and we can share and compare. But I want to put the stress and the highlights in talking about the content and the specific things that a country can do to improve the ecosystem, the data ecosystem that they are having in a particular region. I'm not sure if that answers a little bit the question, Mushiri.
Oh, sorry, I was doing the whole muted talking thing. I think it's good, and I think it's also good that you highlighted the fact that this is not really about comparison. and doing, trying to lay up one country against another, because it will always be a case of apples to oranges, right? There'll always be this underlying, cultural, infrastructure, economic, governance dynamics that will never be the same from one country to another. So so I'm happy that you mentioned that. And I think there was also a question about the reuse of the methodology. I know in the past for us, we have, for instance, borrowed from the work that others have done, learned from them. Like for instance, Open Data Watch had still have a very good methodology for their ODI project, which we've used to some extent in the past. So, here the question would be, is this methodology, can it be picked up? If I wanted to do, if I had my own measurement project, can I use the methodology for that?
Yes, of course. I mean, first of all, we are using, when I mentioned secondary indicators, some of them, apart from other sources, are coming from the work that Open Data Watch has done in particular areas. So we think that they provide a lot of inputs in different areas, because we don't need to duplicate the work whenever the data is already collected with a strong methodology behind. We think it's useful and we can use it. So some of the idea about the secondary indicators is, again, to complement the different exercises and not to overlap, and see where we can add value where the other exercises are not covering or not checking. So first of all is that. Second of all, at the end of this exercise, we are going to provide, now you can find the handbook and everything, but if you want more detail at the end of the exercise, we are going to provide a more robust report on the methodological development and so on. But still, there's a handbook that Mushiri, with some of the information. There's a survey out there. So all those elements are going to be out for anybody that wants to use it or assess it or to provide comments for future editions. So the idea is to make everything as open as possible, because, again, as I was stressing before, the main idea is not the things that we can do as a global exercise with this, but also what we can encourage and support in other regions and countries to do with the methodology, with the data that is coming from the data collection phase. So there are many things that I think they can be done in the future, besides the global report and the global website and so on. And we want to see that, and we want to support that as much as possible.
Excellent. Then we have, one more question. Maybe Lynette, you're sitting on the local level for this, so this might be your question just as much. Beyond generating, this is from Jay Abdullahi Kalon. Beyond generating data, does the GDB support local level advocacy to improve data governance and capabilities in the various countries? 2-3 minutes, Lynette.
Thank you, Mushiri. So if I heard you correctly, it's whether we support local level advocacy. Is that correct?
Yeah, whether the GDB as a tool, as a project, as an output, I think shall support local level advocacy.
Okay. No, I think in terms of how we envision the advocacy around this project, this is an initial really good step to kind of also get stakeholders to just be aware that this is a tool that's available for them to use down the line for the data, for the methodology and all that stuff. But down the line, what we envision at the Sub-Saharan African level is for stakeholders to be able to pick this up and kind of think about maybe context-specific level at the country level. What does this mean for their country? And stakeholders within that country being able to kind of pick up specific issues or cross-cutting issues and being able to advocate for them. I think one of the things that maybe I did not mention is the fact that we, as the Sub-Saharan Africa Regional Hub, will be generating Africa country-level profiles. And I believe this would be a really good starting point for advocacy within the countries themselves, being able able to provide a country summary that says, in terms of the GDP, this is where, you know, Kenya is at, for example, in terms of data governance, data capabilities. So I would say, to the extent of supporting advocacy within the countries, it would be being able to put out there in the hands of stakeholders specific tools that they can then use to, you know, engage with other stakeholders within the country, government, CSOs, around issues on data governance, data capabilities, use and impact, and availability.
Excellent. Thank you, Lynette.
Can I make a small comment to that?
Sure.
I think one of the key things of this new methodology is that, even though it's very important for us, the aspect that is some data is provided as open data and is available online, there are other questions that are looking at, if not, I mean, they can be available in other formats, or maybe inside a public official office, and they can be requested under an FOI request or many other ways. So I think that's a key point. I mean, in the cases that there are some information that is not online or probably is not open, that can be accessed by many organizations or many academics that are working in different topics, that they know there's some data available there that probably they need to ask or request to access it. And in the future, maybe that could be open to everybody, but to also understand what is the data that is there, that is being produced by many public officials, and probably still it was not open with open data format, but is there, and maybe you can request it in different ways and make use of that.
Thank you, Silvana. It's a good segue to one of the questions that was asked earlier, which I think is really, really speaks to that. Someone was asking, why did the project drop open, quote unquote, in its title? And that's exactly it. That the Global Data Barometer is actually a brand new project, a whole different methodology, looking at data, period. So it's open data, shared data, even understanding whether the data is there, but it's there and it's closed, and using your own national mechanisms to get access to it. So that's why this is not a next iteration of the Open Data Barometer, but is a whole different project that kind of takes off from the point where the Open Data Barometer stopped, and tries to be a bit more responsive to the era that we found ourselves in. And I know we are down to the last minute on this really interesting webinar, and on the day when I couldn't turn on my video because I am up country with very, very iffy internet, which has held up excellently, actually. And I would probably just end this with a couple of very encouraging notes. Thank you to everyone who's contributed on the Slido Q&A. So Rafael says GDB is a good initiative that I think will definitely contribute to regions. And it asks, is there any relationship between data generated and the African framework like CADEP? And Rafael, one of the things that was pending and something that we all hoped we could do is a deep dive into the ag sector, especially in Africa, for the GDP. We weren't able to do that under this pilot at the level we would want, but that is definitely possible. And I think that's something that we definitely want to do in the next iteration. Someone encouraging us to investigate the barriers of sharing open data, which is a governance aspect. It says that while it is open data, most require data sharing agreements, and the data sharing agreements can be bureaucracy, time consumption, etc., which become a barrier to sharing that data. Someone else is really keen to see the good practices that you'll find from Africa. So the library is a welcome approach. So thank you everyone. Thank you, Silvana, and the team at ILDA for being available to do this today. Of course, as always, a very big thank you to the AODN team, out of sight, Victor and Amina, making all the cogs and wheels turn. Thank you very much. We are clapping. We're clapping for all of you right now. Just as we say, where I came from many years ago, receive it in the spirit. So this webinar is recorded. It's available on our YouTube channel. Looking forward to the next one, and I'm sure the audience team will keep us posted. Look out for our newsletter. If you're not already subscribed to that, please do subscribe. There'll be more information there on our activities, webinars, and events coming up in the future. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day or the start of it, wherever you are, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.